Hi. Hola.
Hi, hier ist Mr. Döse.
This is Michael Bradley.
Hey, I'm Memphis.
Hey.
Hola. Hello.
I'm here with soccer.com.
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 And I'm talking with my friends soccer.com.
See you soon.
What we do here is go back.
Alright guys, so hopefully you enjoyed me messing around with the ball a little bit at the start of this playtest video. I want to get into my opinions on the low cut Phantom 3, but before that I just want to give a quick little disclaimer as to why I was wearing a firm ground shoe on artificial grass in this video. Unfortunately, due to the circumstances of where I live, it's wintertime right now, there's lots of snow, the fields are frozen, and they're closed, quite frankly. I do not have access to an outdoor natural grass field where these are intended to be used on. So due to those circumstances, and there being demand for a review playtest video on this product, I decided to wear them on artificial grass. The reason why that's not a good idea is, one, for the sake of the durability of the shoe, these shoes are not intended or weren't designed to be used on an artificial playing surface, which can be very abrasive and is just harder on your shoes in general. And two, probably the most important factor, wearing firm ground shoes on artificial grass is not the safest thing in the world. There have been plenty of people who have suffered some pretty severe injuries at their major joints, knees, hips, even ankles, because of wearing firm ground shoes on artificial grass, where, like I said, it's a very abrasive surface, and a firm ground stud pattern can end up providing too much traction, which can lead to injury. So again, for the sake of the video, I did wear firm ground shoes on artificial grass, but it is not something that I personally recommend. If you regularly play on AG fields, I would strongly recommend going for a shoe with an AG specific stud pattern. So on to the review. Now, of course, I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware that I've already done a playtest video on the Hypervenom Phantom 3 DF, the mid-cut version of the new Phantom 3. If you haven't seen that video and you want to check it out, I'll leave a little pop-up on screen. With that being said, the reason why I'm making another playtest video on the low-cut version, which essentially does feature the same upper, it's the fact that the heel area is completely different. And while that's exciting to a certain extent, it's extra exciting when you think about this being the first time ever that we're legitimately getting a low-cut and a mid-cut version of a soccer cleat. This is something that has more or less been the norm in regards to basketball shoes, where you have mids, highs, and even lows, sometimes multiple variations of the same shoe, and that ultimately does have an impact, not so much on performance, but it definitely can impact the feel and overall experience of wearing the shoe. And when you go from the low cut to the mid cut version of the Phantom 3, while I think they're both very good shoes, the experience is definitely different, and that's what I really want to highlight in this video. You could argue that something like the Adidas Glitch, where you can have a mid-cut or a low-cut internal piece, it's a similar type of concept, but ultimately the fit in the heel and the general construction of the shoe doesn't change. It's just extension pieces that go a little bit higher or a little bit lower. With the Phantom 3 and Phantom 3 DF, like I said, it's an entirely different heel construction, which does have a significant impact on the way these shoes fit and feel. So to answer the number one question that I know people will ask, what is the better version of the Phantom 3, the low cut or the mid-cut DF model? And the simple answer to that question is one isn't necessarily better than the other, at least from an objective standpoint. It's really difficult to say that the low-cut version is better over the mid-cut version. In terms of actual on-paper differences between the two shoes that I guess could translate to some kind of performance benefit, technically the low-cut version is a little bit lighter, weighing in at 6.6 ounces versus 6.9 ounces in the mid-cut variation. So it's 0.3 ounces less weight on your feet with the low-cut version of the shoe. Now that's a very small amount of weight, not something you can really feel on feet whatsoever. So it's really difficult to say that that is a performance advantage. With that being said, one major aspect going from low-cut to mid-cut with the Phantom 3 that I definitely noticed right away is the way that they fit in the heel area. This difference in construction makes a difference in the way that the shoe fits, makes a difference in the shape of the heel, and ultimately can play a huge role in how comfortable the shoe is going to be. Now, with the mid-cut models from Nike, while they're a lot more comfortable than the first generation mid-cuts were, be it the Obra 1, the Superfly 4, or the Phantom 2. I think that the Obra 2, the Superfly 5, and the Phantom 3 DF are all much more comfortable mid-cut versions of what Nike has offered so far and in the past. With that said, what I find with a lot of these Nike mid-cut models is that the shape of the heel area internally, what's actually sitting against your foot, tends to be less defined and less, I guess, precise in terms of what you can get from a low-cut shoe. What you're getting here with this low-cut Phantom 3 is essentially what we got from the Phantom 1 as well as the Hypervenom finish. This is kind of the standard setup for a pair of soccer cleats, something that we have basically had on every single shoe up until about 2014 when they introduced these mid-cut models. And while the look of the shoe is something that a lot of people really like, and I understand that completely, but when you're talking about realistic stuff that's going to impact your experience with the shoe, I really do feel like these low-cut models are more comfortable than the mid-cut models from Nike. Can you get a comfortable fit from the mid-cut shoes? Absolutely you can, but when you try on the mid-cut version versus the low-cut version, The low cut version has such a more defined shape. It's more rounded. It almost matches the shape of your heel more closely than what you're going to find from any of the mid-cut models from Nike. Because of that, you get a much more comfortable sensation. Your heel feels like it's more locked in place. You get a better sense of being connected to the shoe because it does fit you better. And ultimately, this impacts the comfort as well, where I definitely do feel more comfortable wearing the low-cut version of the shoe. Now, in regards to the mid-cut collar, the DF collar you're going to find on these Nike mid-cut models, it's a big misconception that they offer any kind of performance advantage. Yes, obviously it looks a little bit different, but there's no ankle support from the collar. It's basically just an extra piece of material. If anything, it's extra bulk that wouldn't otherwise be there in the low-cut version, which again, I would argue is potentially a positive thing rather than a negative thing. So again, in regards to which is better, the low cut or the mid cut variation, I would argue the low cut version simply based on how they fit, the better comfort that they offer, the more locked in sensation that you get in the heel. It is slightly lighter, although the difference is quite minimal. And again, I just think for most people, if they have the opportunity to try on the low cut one and the mid cut one side by side, looks aside completely, most people are going to prefer the fit of the low cut version, sorry. So again, I'm not recommending the mid cut version, but I think if you're really trying to decide between the two, I still think that the low cut way of making a soccer shoe is the best way in terms of getting the most comfortable, familiar, and best fit overall. The other thing to keep in mind is, I guess, the value proposition. Obviously, these are top-end expensive shoes, so value isn't the best way to look at things, but the mid-cut version retails for $300 and the low-cut version retails for $50 less at $250. So from a straight-up value standpoint, this is the better deal. So in regards to the rest of the shoe, it's pretty much the same as the Phantom 3 DF. You're getting the same Flyknit construction for the upper. Obviously it cuts off at the low cut point on the shoe, basically right above the top of your foot. And instead of an actual tongue, it does remain a one-piece continuous flowing Flyknit upper, where the central part where a tongue would normally be and basically where the laces are positioned being an elasticated Flyknit material. So you'll find that when you put these on, similar to the mid-cut version of the shoe, the center portion kind of stretches out and then compresses back to the shape of your foot, very similar to how a sock would react when you put a pair of those on. So with the upper itself, it does have the 3D texturing throughout the entire upper. And again, a lot of people want to draw comparisons to the other Flyknit models from Nike, be it the Superfly 5 or the Magista Obra 2 with their 3D textured uppers as well. But this does feel legitimately different, a little bit thinner than what you're going to get from the Obra, definitely less of a dampened sensation than what you're going to get from the Obra, but at the same time, not quite as thin, not quite as barefoot feeling as what you're going to get from the Superfly 5, especially in this striking area where you're going to find that you have 2 millimeters of pour-on foam inserted within this kind of textured diamond pattern. Now the pour-on foam is a rate-dependent material, meaning that upon hard impacts, it hardens, and upon softer impacts, it remains soft. How does this actually impact touch on the ball? It's something that's not super noticeable when you're actually shooting. I wouldn't really call this a striking element. All it's really doing in terms of impacting the feel when it comes to shooting is just taking the sting off your shot. It's not going to feel like you're not wearing shoes at all. It's not going to feel super, super thin, but at the same time, it's not providing any kind of a dampening sensation. It's not feeling like it's taking away from that pingy feel that you would otherwise get from a thin upper. It's kind of just taking the edge off of the contact, if that makes any sense, which I would argue is more of a comfort thing rather than an actual performance quality. Either way, it feels quite good. It's something you'll notice maybe the first 10 or 15 shots when wearing the shoes for the first time, but after that you pretty much forget about it entirely and it becomes part of the shoe. It also doesn't really add any noticeable bulk when you're actually wearing them. In regards to softer contact on the ball though, such as passing, receiving a pass, and even juggling, that's when you are going to notice that little bit of extra padding in this area of the foot where you have the pour-on foam inserts. It's not a significant amount of padding, but again, it does kind of change up the feel ever so slightly in that the shoe does come across as being a fairly thin upper in terms of how much padding you're getting on the ball, But again, in this particular area of the foot, you just get that little bit of an extra dampening sensation without taking away ball feel that I actually really like about this shoe. It's kind of a quirk that is specific to this model. That particular aspect you could compare to something like an Evo Power, but aside from kind of comparing this to the Evo Power, they aren't really similar shoes at all in terms of how they actually feel. Just a slight amount of cushion that you will notice on the foot that's added because of the pour-on foam when juggling is really the only time you're going to see this as a feature that I guess plays any part in the actual performance. But nonetheless, it's a cool idea from Nike, and it does work in a positive way, in my opinion. Now, the lacing system is something that is fairly controversial with this particular shoe, in that the laces are attached to the shoe by way of exposed flywire cables that run from the base of the sole into the lacing system. They crisscross, and those two crisscross loops basically create your lacing positions. Now, a lot of people are really concerned about these flywire cables potentially breaking, snapping off, getting caught in other players' studs. And quite honestly, once you actually tie the laces tight, the actual flywire cables get pressed against the upper pretty much almost completely flat, and the actual openings themselves, especially when the laces are tied, are very, very small, smaller than pretty much any stud that I've ever seen. So the likelihood of a stud actually getting caught in the lace loop and then getting torn out because of that kind of sudden pull, it's very, very unlikely. I haven't experienced any issues with it thus far. And this also isn't the first time that Nike has used this type of a lacing system on their shoes. Yes, this is the first time that we're seeing it on a soccer cleat, but they've done this in basketball, they've done this in running shoes, they've done it in plenty of other of their sport line footwear as well. So again, I'm not too concerned about the durability aspect of the actual flywire cables and the lacing system. Now, in terms of how it actually performs, because it is a performance element, there's a reason why there are laces and exposed flywire cables here, is that when you pull the laces tight, it really does have a direct impact on how tight and how secure the shoe feels on your foot. They pull from the base of the sole into the lacing system and do a really good job of keeping your foot nice and secure inside of the shoe. It gives the shoe a much more responsive sensation than I think you might expect just based on how soft this Flyknit upper is. There's not a lot of internal reinforcement, and especially once you wear them a couple times, they just get super, super soft. This is arguably the most sock-like feel you can get from any of the Flyknit Nikes currently on offer from the brand. So in that regard, the actual flywire lacing system, not only does it work well, it's extremely effective in terms of keeping your foot locked in place. So really, really impressed with that. Minimal rollover inside the shoe. Once you tie those laces tight, they stay nice and tight. And again, you have that nice, secure one-to-one connection inside of the boot. Other little features you're gonna find is, of course, ACC all conditions control. Wet control element, not something I would really play too much into. It's something that I don't think is that big of a deal. It's more of a gimmicky feature than anything. You do have the Nike skin covering for the majority of the upper, so it maintains a very similar amount of grip on the surface as what you'll find from the other Flyknit models from Nike, so you kind of know what to expect in that regard. Internally, you do have a smooth synthetic leather liner, which is pretty straightforward. Again, pretty much exactly like what we saw on previous generations of high-end Hypervenoms. Works quite well, feels nice and comfortable. You do, of course, get the removable Nike Grip insole, which again, they tout as a major feature in terms of gripping your sock and just adding to the responsiveness of the shoe. To me, honestly, it doesn't feel any different from a regular pair of insoles. So again, more of a gimmicky thing as opposed to something that has any realistic impact on actual performance. The sole plate and stud pattern obviously completely redesigned in comparison to previous generation Hypervenom Phantom models. The sole plate is much more flexible this time around using a Pebax nylon combination of materials. Very flexible in the toe box and forefoot area, which in combination with the soft Flyknit upper, I just think makes for a much more natural sensation on your foot that I personally prefer over the stiffer feel that we got from sole plates and general uppers from previous generations of Hypervenom. So that is a major change. And in regards to the stud pattern, while I did wear them on artificial grass, which pretty much any firm ground stud pattern is going to work well traction-wise on artificial grass, this does perform quite well. You get the mercurial style chevron bladed studs on the lateral side, and then these hexagon shaped studs on the medial side that pretty much react and perform like conical studs would. So you get a very aggressive bite on the lateral side of the shoe and more of a freedom to twist and pivot on the medial side. It feels very stable underfoot, and overall it just works extremely well. It's definitely a good stud pattern overall, and I do prefer this redesign over the original variation of the Hypervenom stud pattern that we got from previous models. In regards to the fit and sizing, nothing is different in comparison to the mid-cut version for those that are wondering. They run true to size. I wore my usual size 9 US for review, and the fit and the length was absolutely perfect. Sizing is the same in comparison to previous generation of Hypervenoms as well. And in regards to the shape, it does maintain the same general shape as previous Hypervenom generations. So it's a tighter fitting shoe, but it definitely isn't quite as narrow or as tight fitting as what you'll get from the Mercurials, but not quite as wide as the Magistas. It kind of is that middle ground. Width-wise, I'd say they're going to be suitable for most people. The Flyknit upper is very soft and pliable, and it does have that sock-like sensation in terms of how it feels when wrapping your foot. It doesn't feel like it's squeezing your foot by any means, which I know is a complaint of a lot of people when they try Mercurials for the first time. So this will have that Mercurial vibe in terms of fitting tighter, but it doesn't feel at any point like it's squeezing your foot. They definitely have some decent width to them, and I would say are going to be suitable for most people. With that being said, in regards to stretching, they're not really going to stretch all that much. This is really a predetermined width and a predetermined shape to the upper. It's obviously very heavily engineered. So basically the way they're going to fit out of the box is the way they're going to fit for their entire lifespan. There's not too much to break in here. There's not really any stretching to be had. You'll find that the upper does soften up after a little bit of wear time, but that's about the only difference you're going to find in terms of the shoes changing from being brand new. So to sum everything up, I really think that the Phantom 3 in the low cut variation is a fantastic shoe. In comparison to the DF model, I do prefer the low cut version, although with that said, I don't not recommend the mid cut version. If you want the mid cut version, if you want the collar, if you just really like the look of the shoe and you're willing to spend the extra $50, by all means, go for them. It's a very, very good shoe, even in comparison to the low cut Phantom 3. With that being said, I think the biggest reason why I'm excited about this particular shoe is because it finally shows us that Nike can make this Flyknit upper or any of their Flyknit uppers in a low cut variation. It's the first time that we're seeing this, and hopefully if this shoe sells well, which I think it will, there is definitely a strong possibility that with future generations of Mercurials and future generations of Magistas, that we may get a mid-cut and low-cut version of the Superfly and Obra. Hopefully that happens. I'm very excited for that. I'm sure a lot of you guys watching this video are excited for that as well. And that is pretty much the end of my review. If you were thinking about the low-cut Phantom 3 or even the mid-cut one, they're very, very good shoes. Very happy with them. You can't go wrong either way. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you're interested in a pair of these for yourself, there'll be a little pop-up on screen, or you can click the first link down below in the description. That'll take you to the review page on my website where you'll find Buy It Now links with exclusive SR4U coupon codes where you'll actually be able to pick these up below their normal $250 retail price. So if you're interested in a pair, be sure to go ahead and check that out. If you have any questions regarding the low-cut Phantom 3 or the Phantom 3 in general, mid or low, let me know down below in the comments and I definitely will get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed this playtest video, be sure to support it with a like. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. You can find all of my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.